Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda from staff?
Just one, I would like to request that item D from the consent agenda, the Kaufman Engineering contract be moved down to action item.
Okay. And I believe that Commissioner Fox had wanted to move the amendment number 3 to the FBO agreement. It's
Yeah.
down to discussion.
Two-seated discussion and I would offer up 2D on the Kaufman contract. I would suggest we tuck it in under 4D. As we go through the bridge risk register, that's a natural place to talk about the.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then the action item that can be done under 7.
Okay. Public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? No, there's just observational. Okay. Well, if that's the case, can I get the motion to approve the consent agenda as modified, eliminating C and D?
I so move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Chair aye. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the bridge replacement project update? If not, then we can move to presentation and discussion items. First one is Lot 1 development traffic assessment report. Greg.
Good evening, commissioners. This evening we have representing KPFF, we have Kurt, and I'm going to mess it up, Van der Zanden.
You didn't mess it up.
Perfect. And Paul Schmidtke. As illustrated in your memo, an explanation of this process. I don't think it's foreign to anyone. So without further ado, I would like to introduce both of these gentlemen to walk us through the state of the project.
I guess we'll stand up there. Right? All right. Well, thank you very much. It's actually, we don't get a chance to actually speak in front of real people very often. That's excellent. Thank you very much. So in the way of introductions, real quick, I'm Kurt Van der Zanden. I'm a principal of KPFF Consulting Engineers. I've actually been doing work with the port for over 30 years now, I think it is. One of my first projects is actually the windsurfing event site that I did as a drafter back in the early 90s or whatever it was. So it's fun to be back here again. But I'm a principal with KPFF. I'm actually kind of managing this project for us. Paul Schmidtke is with me. Paul's actually a project engineer and he's taken on a pretty heavy role with this one as well. So he's doing most of the work. I'm just kind of in the background helping move things along. That's not true. Also part of our team for this project, we have Walker Macy, who's looking at it for landscape architecture and urban design, and DKS, who actually is becoming a very critical partner in this one, especially related to the traffic analysis that we'll talk about today. Let's go to the next. Oh, I forgot to even have you advance to the first slide. So next slide. Thank you. All right, so just a quick primer on what we're doing and why we're here. We were hired several months back to basically look at the development of Anchor Way and First Street. This came out of some conceptual design work that we worked with Walker Macy on probably almost 2 years ago now.
I think so.
Okay. So we were hired to do this project, and as we were working through scoping with Kevin and Greg, it became apparent that there was some question about whether the extension of Anchor Way was really the right project at the right time. So we spent the last couple of months really going back through and looking at our historical documentation to see kind of what was behind the idea of actually doing Anchor Way. And also to really look harder at the traffic impacts of it. Does it actually help to alleviate some of the traffic concerns specifically around Riverside and 2nd Street or not? So that was really our charge, and that's what we're here to present on tonight. Let's go to the next slide. From a schedule perspective, we're essentially here tonight, finishing up task 2. Hope as soon as we actually have clear direction from the commission, from the port as to what project we're developing, we'll launch into development of construction documents for that project, whether that be the current concept or some iteration thereof. The goal under this scenario is to really be through final design in August of 2024. With construction starting in fall and fall of 2024 and basically extending into probably 2025. So that's what we're looking at right now. Next slide. As I said earlier, this is really what we're here to present on tonight, is really this initial assessment about Anchor Way. Yeah. So there's Anchor Way. I think I already said most of my stuff on this slide, so thank you. So next slide. So we were looking at this research primarily from 3 different viewpoints. One was looking at the historical documentation, looking specifically at some of the civil engineering background to why Anchor Way was there and what the intent was. Walker Macy did their own research relative to the urban design aspects of it. And DKS got in and really looked hard at Anchor Way, how it affected different models for basically the second Riverside intersection and basically the adjacent intersections as well. Next slide. So from a civil engineering standpoint, I mean, it's fairly straightforward. We really are looking at Anchor Way as being a primary east-west connector, bringing folk for both vehicular and pedestrians, bringing folks from the businesses to the west of 2nd Street down to the waterfront and the improvements that were made there several years ago. It's also has been looked at least in the current concept, we were also looking at the incorporation of a new transit stop and improve transit circulation using Anchor Way. With that said, that we do believe that if Anchor Way wasn't there, we could find another spot to accommodate that transit stop. So I want to be really clear on that. One of the other real keys to it from the civil infrastructure standpoint is using that alignment as a utility corridor. So basically making sure that we get adequate utility infrastructure in place to support development of the lots on either side. That includes, we have stormwater running in Anchor Way. We're looking at new water systems, gas, communications, thank you, electrical. And I think sanitary sewer, I believe, is served off of 1st Street.
Yep.
Cool, thank you. And next one, Paul, you're up.
Yeah, so in addition to civil, our team also looked at the urban design aspect, and so Walker Macy headed that up. And there are 3 primary things that they found is when they looked at the historical documentation that was done in previous reports and previous memos, they identified that the lot size trends, the urban blocks, and the view corridor building edges were 3 primary reasons why Anchor Way was chosen to continue. And so for the lot size trends, it's important to understand that that was done specifically with Port of Hood River lot sizes. So what was done in the past, these are lots that are implemented now, and what they saw were these specific sizes, and split up in the diagram as you can see on the right. Those sizes were successful lot sizes, and Anchor Way provided a framework for those lots. It also provided the urban blocks. So as you are going down the existing Anchor Way, heading towards Nichols Basin, it provides a block system for pedestrians and vehicular traffic that may not be familiar with the port. A grid system is easier for people to navigate. Also, view corridors and building edges. As you go down Anchor Way, being able to see all the way through to Nichols Basin is a really good positive for urban design, as well as building edges lining up so that they aren't necessarily cattywampus, but they stay linear with other buildings along the port. Next slide, please.
Now we get into the exciting.
This is the fun part. So DKS was on our team and they provided a traffic study. And so Here on the left side, we have an Excel spreadsheet, which everybody loves. And on the right side is an image, and you can see 1, 2, and 3. And so we have Riverside Drive and second as the 1, 2 is Anchor Way, and second, and the third is Portway Avenue and Second Street. And so what DKS did is they provided traffic counts for the existing conditions and what is currently happening here at the port. And so we have intersections 1, 2, and 3. We have the traffic control or the existing traffic control, and then we have the mobility targets. And there's a difference between the intersection at Riverside and Second because it's controlled by ODOT's mobility target, while the other two, Anchor Way and Portway respectively, are controlled by the City of Hood River mobility targets. VCs are also referred to as volume to capacity ratios. You can see that the weekend PM is our highest amount of counts, and there we are looking great. We are underneath the current mobility target of 0.95 and we are at 0.66. Yeah, which is below the mobility target, as well as our Second Street and Anchor Way and our Second Street and Portway Avenue. Those are greater than the level of service D that is allowed by City of Hood River. So current and existing conditions, we're doing good. Next slide, please. So what DKS then looked at is they looked at 2 different models. So they looked at a model without Anchor Way and they looked at a model with Anchor Way, and they applied a growth rate which is going to be steady, a steady growth rate, which is used for projecting the maximum growth that the port would have. And so they go 20 years for the maximum growth. And in those 20 years, they found that in 2031, the mobility target for the model without Anchor Way ended up meeting the mobility target that is allowed by ODOT. And so what that means is without Anchor Way in 2031, something needs to be done to Second and Riverside in order to maintain the mobility target that ODOT has set. If you were to construct Anchor Way, you would roughly get 2 more years, 1 to 2 years of additional time, but then you would still need to do something to Second and Riverside. 2023 and 2033 and 2033. Yes.
Could I ask you a question? I just want to make sure. So Second and Riverside is the critical intersection.
Absolutely.
As far as ODOT's concerned.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Have they looked at a little farther or a little closer to town, you know, the on and off ramps of 84?
Mm.
Does this still take precedent as far as concerns of volume?
Yeah, I
If
believe
we fix this, we don't have to worry about the interstate?
that's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
We'll definitely verify that because
Okay.
yeah, we can do this traffic study ourselves, but we can definitely double check it.
Good.
But that is our understanding is that basically Second Riverside is a driver for everything ODOT. The area management plan that ODOT did, I can't remember now. It's been
2010.
Yeah, so it's been several years that basically it was really focused on the level of service at that intersection.
Okay, and your growth factor is based on the businesses that you project we would put in
Right.
the new area.
Yes.
It's
yeah.
projected on the current land use that's
Okay.
allowed there.
Have you looked at all that if we put an event center out there where you're gonna have higher peaks
Yeah.
and lower sustained, what does that do to Second and Riverside?
We haven't modeled that, but I will say pretty succinctly is that would accelerate this need. That would clearly, if you're driving that volume, because that's a much quicker hit. At least based on what you're saying, I think that's.
But if we put an event center out there where you have several thousand cars
Right,
come in and go out pretty much in a very short period of time. What you're talking about at the kind of a roundabout or something at Second and Riverside would solve that issue.
that's my understanding.
Okay.
But that was not necessarily specifically modeled.
Right.
But the understanding is that any growth would need, there would need to be something done to Second and Riverside. And what was modeled here was the weekend, and that was course, that's the highest here at Hood River, and so. If it was an event center, that would probably still happen on a weekend, so
Oh, yeah,
the
but
maximum.
the peak I would guess would go up.
Yes,
Yeah, and probably spread out a bit, I
Yeah.
would imagine.
Yeah.
But what you're saying on this slide here is extending Anchor Way from a mobility target standpoint does nothing for us. It
Yeah.
essentially
fractional.
in just 2 years, nothing,
Yes.
nothing. Okay.
And are you guys aware, what's the consequence? Like if we exceed ODOT's volume of capacity?
I believe ODOT has some jurisdiction, basically, anything that's affecting an intersection within their area management plan.
Yeah.
They actually do have a say in any land use action that would allow that development to occur. So I'm not quite sure from a legal standpoint what they've got, but I mean, they certainly do have control of access to their freeway. And access to their facility. So I think that's the cutoff.
And any development that would have been proposed that would exceed the volume to capacity ratio would be denied by ODOT.
Yeah.
So that development wouldn't be allowed to be.
Unless you came up with a way to fix the.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. And so understanding that Second and Riverside was kind of the linchpin, what DKS did is they looked at the existing condition as we look at full build out, which was 20 years. And this is assuming that everything is developed, or I guess the model is showing everything's developed at lot 1 and the port. This is the maximum development that you can take place, right? So that can take place. So this is a model at full capacity. And so we looked at weekends without Anchorway and weekends with Anchorway. So you have the existing condition up top, which is the all-way stop control, and then the 4 possible conditions that could be done at Second and Riverside, which is a 2-way stop control, a 2-way stop control with northbound right turn lane, a roundabout, and a traffic signal. And when we change from an all-way stop to these other 4 options, we're then held by the highway design manual instead of ODOT. And so that volume to capacity ratio actually decreases. So we need to now be at a 0.8. And
So, I'm sorry to interrupt again. So the roundabout option, would that be a single lane or a double lane?
It's actually single lane.
I think, yeah, I believe it was modeled as a single lane.
Yeah, you have to go back.
But if you did a double lane, you would be able to get a lot more volume through there, would you not, and actually reduce this even more?
Yeah,
Possibly.
if you needed to, yeah.
So what the 4 options were, you can see there's a bunch of numbers, but the main takeaway here is that the only 2 that were underneath the volume to capacity ratio is the roundabout and the traffic signal. And so that was whether you had Anchorway or you didn't have Anchorway. And so that's the main takeaway. We get a little closer with the traffic signal to that volume to capacity ratio, but this again, understand this is full build out. This is there's not future growth expected at this point. Everything is built. There shouldn't be any more growth at that point. Next slide, please.
So, what we're trying to help you with at this point is to get to a decision on what project you move forward. So in working with Kevin, with Greg, we basically have come up with 4 different alternatives on how to move forward. All of these are based on some primary assumptions. Number 1 being that basically that we could get the city and the ODOT to agree with the options that we're proposing here. We know that there are likely some strings attached to some of the funding that's already been acquired or is in process that maybe you can shift some, maybe you can't. I don't know the answer to that, and I know the staff will definitely have some good times trying to suss that out. The other thing to point out is that, and this came from Kevin, was that basically the staff will certainly pursue other grants to complete First Street along realignment and Anchorway if needed. I guess that's assuming that we actually maybe go a different route here.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, this project is right around $4 million, the Anchorway First Street. So clearly the difference between the EDA grants and the project
Yeah.
will be looking for more grant funding to get it done, regardless of what you do.
Let's go to the next slide. So the 4 options that we're looking at is 1 being the current concept, which is essentially full implementation of Anchorway first. Second would be to actually look at doing first and only utilities within the Anchorway corridor, trying to actually save some money to allow something to begin to happen at Second and Riverside. The third being basically shifting focus towards Second Street and Riverside and basically deferring on First and Anchorway until additional funding can be secured. And again, this is really contingent on the idea of being able to shift some of those EDA grants over to be able to jumpstart the Second and Riverside work. 4 is basically looking at just carrying through a design for First and Anchor, and again, looking at shifting some of the focus over to starting work on design and whatever analysis is necessary to get Second Riverside off. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so for number 1, again, this is the current concept where everything along Anchorway and the First Street alignment is implemented. So we saw that working with Port staff, the advantages were, it's currently funded. It realigns First Street, which I think is really important. That allows for the development along Nichols Basin. It also establishes a utility corridor. That was one of the main items that we found when we were doing historical research. It establishes a pedestrian and vehicular access. It frames lot 1, and it also provides a temporary solution for Second and Riverside, even if it's very small. It still helps a little. The disadvantages are it's less flexible for lot 1 development. So we're putting something in with hardscape with curb and road, but we may not know necessarily what's actually going to happen with lot 1. And then it's not a long-term solution for Second Riverside. So next slide, please. And then for the second one, that's First Street realignment, bringing that up and over so that you can develop along Nichols Basin. But just bring the utilities across where the existing Anchorway alignment is. And currently there are existing utilities within lot 1 that are about 100 feet south. And the majority of those would be relocated into the Anchorway alignment. That would still allow flexibility on what that lot looks like. And the advantages there is, again, it's currently funded. It realigns First Street to allow for development along Nichols Basin, establishes the utility corridor, and allows for flexibility of the development for lot 1. So you're not necessarily having Anchorway hardscape in there, so you can still be a little flexible. The disadvantages is that it doesn't address the future traffic issues at Second and Riverside, just like option 1. And it doesn't provide a set vehicular or pedestrian access through lot 1. Or at least it's not identified at this time. It could still be implemented. It could look something different than what we have currently in the concept. Next slide, please. And then the third is shifting all the focus on the Second and Riverside. And this, if funding can be transferred and all of the caveats that Kurt has explained, that those could be done. The advantage is that it provides a permanent solution to Second and Riverside. If funds are available, it also can provide a utility corridor through lot 1. So this is if we're able to shift funds over to Second and Riverside and still complete First and Anchor with the same bucket of funds. And then also funds are available and realigns First Street to allow for development along Nichols Basin. But again, the advantage is it would be assessing and providing a permanent solution to the, I don't want to say problem at Second and Riverside, but the traffic challenge at Second and Riverside as lot 1 develops. The disadvantages is that we're not sure if the current funding can be transferred. We know that Port staff is hard at work trying to get that figured out. And then there may not be funds to realign First Street or additional funds with what we have currently. And then there may not be additional funds to construct a utility corridor through lot 1. Next slide, please.
Do you have a feel for what 3 would cost?
We knew that was coming. I'll be honest with you, we don't know right now. We have so we're looking at basically 4 mil right now for Anchorway First roughly. We think around about, and this is a big caveat.
2.5.
Thinking about a 2.5 for construction cost.
That's a single lane.
I believe that is a single lane.
Yes.
So if you
And that's
we
not
ended up doing a double lane for
Probably
future.
Probably
Probably.
half. Probably take you to 3 probably.
and that-
Isn't Second a city street?
Yeah, it is. There's portions that are and there's portions that are not. It's a really strange jurisdictional piece down there.
You think it's, Greg's thinking it might be ODOT.
It's, yeah. it's
But what I'm
ODOT.
asking is, would we have opportunity to work with the city for different funding mechanisms?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
To do a roundabout in conjunction with them?
I don't see why you couldn't.
We'd certainly, I don't know if they'd necessarily be putting funds in, certainly could ask them, but they'll definitely want to be part of the design concept and being part of the development of the project.
Because Riverside's, is that a port or that's a
ODOT.
city?
ODOT.
That's an ODOT.
And,
Okay.
and
How
that
much money do we have in grant now?
Just under 2 million.
Yeah.
2 million.
And the 2.5 is only construction costs. It does not include right of way acquisition if there needs to be. And there's no design included at that 2.5.
Okay.
Again, that's a really rough number. I mean, just based
Very.
on past. Roundabouts can get pretty tricky from a cost perspective, depending on what the property's like and how much grading we're talking about and how much impact we have into adjacent properties.
President, can I ask a quick question?
Hmm?
So the current contract
Yeah.
that you're on,
Right.
if for some reason. The commissioner were to want to go into, let's just say, option 3, then we would need to sit down and rescope.
Yeah.
What we've got. So there is some funding that is currently under contract for engineering.
Mhm.
But it's all identified for Anchor Way and First.
Right.
So we would need to sit down and.
Yeah.
And modify that.
Yeah, and just for the board to remember, this is a initial presentation of kind of what our options are, and this is on our agenda for fall planning for further discussion and decision.
And so option 4, I believe we covered everything with option 3. Again, option 3 is second and Riverside only, and if there's additional funding, then doing the first realignment and the Anchor Way utility. So option 4 is continuing with the current concept only through construction documents. And so design would be completed. Those plans would then be put on the shelf for a small amount of time. But construction would not continue, and then the rest of the funding would then be directed towards Second and Riverside to fix that. What did you say? Not issue again. Challenge. Thank you. Yes, to address that challenge. And so the advantages here are a portion of this is currently funded, and it can continue while other things are worked out. And it allows for flexibility for future construction to be implemented as needed from development. And then costs for Anchor Way and First Street could potentially be offset by incoming developers if it's not constructed now. We could have the plans and it could be talked about in the development. And then also it provides a permanent solution for the future.
I'm gonna rephrase that just a little bit.
Yeah.
It provides a start to a permanent solution for Riverside in a second. Because this would likely focus more on getting through concept design, making sure we're understanding cost a lot better. And getting some of that early design work done.
And then the disadvantages would be lot 1 remains undeveloped. And the current funding may not be transferable. So,
So a clarification question on 2.
yes.
It fixes First Street alignment.
Yeah.
So it sets us up for the basin work. When you say utilities. How far, I'm assuming it takes it all the way across lot 1. Across the street where First Street's gonna get realigned to. So it's stubbed out, so
Yeah.
Nichols Basin could use it, is that correct?
Yes.
That's a thought.
I'll go for it.
I was just gonna say that the First Street realignment project has its own utilities that would need to be shifted or just implemented. So the water line needs to be shifted over into the street. Storm would need to be put into the street, as well as all the utility connections for the sanitary sewer. Those things would be stubbed out at this time to the right of way line.
So on First Street where it is now, is there power over there?
Mhm.
Okay, so we don't have to bring power and water and everything across lot 1
the critical utility coming across lot one is actually more storm drainage than anything else. There's an outfall that's basically located, that outfalls into Nichols, that basically goes, currently it runs about 100 feet south, I think, of the proposed alignment. That basically connects in, pulls in all the water coming from Second.
Yeah, where I'm going with this, and maybe you can help me.
Okay.
When you, can you pull the map back up? That shows the area. Yeah, that's good right there. So if you brought utilities across where you see two, all the way across, First Street.
Sure.
If you're not careful, you mess up development. If you wanted to put a nice event center there and it happens to straddle
Well, and
that
that's-
area, you're creating a roadblock.
Well, so there may be another option that we haven't said here, which is basically you leave Anchor Way alone for right now. Like I guess we never actually played that one out, is that, you know, right now, I mean, the stormwater is basically coming across at least right
there,
here. And as long as that has to stay there for now.
Yeah.
It could relocate to wherever Anchor Way ends up wanting to be, as long as something comes through there. Well, I know we don't have grade to reroute it all the way up to Fort Way or to Riverside. So at some point through there, we do definitely need a utility corridor for the
Okay,
stormwater, so.
but if we wanted to realign First Street now.
Yeah.
We've got utilities in the area for development to the east of First Street, out there by Nichols Basin. We don't have to put utilities all the way across.
Currently, all the utilities are coming through just
Okay.
about 100 feet south,
Well, that's
so,
good.
yes, yeah.
So so I think the only caveat would be is if it did start to get divided into smaller lots, then of course you'd start having some problems with trying to serve the ones that we're not facing directly on the first.
No, I understand that.
Ben brings up a really good point too. The city is going to be doing a significant amount of work on Riverside for their new stormwater lines. We should be working with them and do this all together.
I mean, if, we'll figure this out at fall planning, but.
Yeah.
Because I know that's happening next year, about the same time frame as this. There isn't any reason in the world, if we decide to do anything in that region of Second Street, we shouldn't try to piggyback that project at the same time. And be doing that together, so we should at least look into that as one of the questions we might have at fall planning.
I always love hearing people say those things. There's a lot of places that don't.
I don't know if this is the time for it. It would certainly be helpful as we go into fall planning. If we had some numbers to work with, engineer's estimate of like what it would take to put the roundabout down there and on one. What is it gonna take to realign First Street? And what would it take to get some utilities stubbed out? So we could go ahead and develop Nichols Basin at some,
Right.
maybe an earlier stage.
Well, and I think we have part of that. We have part of that. The concept design work that we did several years ago basically had. Well, we had pretty decent cost estimates done for first. That was in support of the grant application.
Drops in 2 million.
The piece that we don't have is basically, we haven't really done a deep dive on the intersection of Second Riverside yet, so. We can certainly work with staff to figure out. How to make that happen.
Well, I really like it when you said that it appears that ODOT's real hard point is
Yeah.
right there at that intersection, and it's not closer to town going into the 84 intersection. That's the key intersection.
Yeah.
The nice thing is we've got land right now to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and their concern here obviously is if this gets jammed up, then they're worried about the cascade effect back out onto the main line, which I've seen when the project didn't handle that well. It was not a pretty thing. So.
It's kind of a good thing we didn't put that hotel. up there.
Yeah, it really is.
So is there anything that staff can do as we get ready for fall planning? Or is there any of these options that you're kind of leaning towards, just to kind of give us a little head start?
I mean-
don't know if we should, I'm sorry.
But
I don't think that matters so much as getting us information. We need to make that decision, like. How much money do we have? To start, right? What's our starting point? And congratulations, by the way, if everybody doesn't know, and it hasn't been publicly said. Well done. How much money do we have? How much do some of these options cost? Cause we don't know, and so we'll need those, generally speaking. That information, it's not gonna be a quote, but just generally, we think X at fall planning, and third, what can these grants be used for and what can they not be used for to the best of our knowledge by that time? Are the three things I think we would need.
I would add two more things to that if you could. One is approximately how long is it gonna take to design each of these steps? And the second piece is roughly how much construction are we looking at, timeframe?
Okay. Yeah, and I will say, anything at Second Riverside basically brings in the ODOT review stuff, which can be kind of grueling.
Mhm.
And it certainly adds time, but. You know, we've actually had some pretty good luck with this region, and their review periods tend to be a little bit more solid than some of the other ones that we've worked in. So. We can certainly look at that and take our best stab at defining that.
I have a further question, maybe it's a staff thing to figure out. With respect to understanding possible funding sources. If we proceeded with option one, say, and did this whole project as spec'd. And then we're doing this, and then in a couple of years, we want to try to get funding to put a roundabout at this critical intersection. Because it's important to ODOT, do we have state sources of funding, which we can sort of, you know how legislators are in state organizations, if you go and you say, this is urgent. And we're gonna go over our volume over capacity if we don't get the money to build this roundabout. So the question is, from a strategic perspective, looking at this, can a plea like that be made that is more likely to receive funding? Whereas, let's say, even if we could take the funding we've already got for this and shift it, and they say, yeah, that's fine, you can shift it to do this roundabout. And then later down the line, we say, well, we want to do this Anchor Way thing. And maybe that from these same funding sources, they're like, well, we don't care about that. That's not crucial because it doesn't impact the freeway. So then it's more difficult to get funding. So I guess the way I'm looking at this long term as a big project with lots of moving pieces is, where does it come down on the funding? What's more likely? Where are we more likely to get funding? What sorts of
So
grants?
there's two things going on here. One is there's economic development.
Yeah.
And then you've got transportation flow. And so the EDA money is expecting there to be 7 new jobs created
Mhm.
in this general area because of the improvement. Can we still make that argument by moving it to the roundabout? You know, we'll see. We'll have to check that out. ODOT may have less interest on the economic development side, but certainly that transportation flow they'll want to get on. I mean, I think the number one upcoming grant will be the new Connect Oregon. So there's $49 million that's been capitalized there. This project has a lot of attention on it. It's highly ranking in the Mid-Columbia CEDS document. So I think we got the bird in the hand with the Anchor Way and First. But if EDA, based upon this discussion, would agree for those funds to include the roundabout, then I think we can leverage that in other ways with ODOT funding. But really, I'm really interested in fall planning to see which of these options you're interested in pursuing. We've got a list of things to pull together, at least in who knows the level of effort we'll be able to do in 2 or 3 weeks, but certainly get you some round numbers, including those funding opportunities.
Mhm. Great, thanks.
One big caveat in the front, with regard to transportation funding, I mean, if you draw in Federal Highways Administration money, then the question of timing becomes a lot different. That will extend things out quite a bit on the design side and basically getting through the process. It adds pretty considerably to the amount of documentation that's got to be put together.
And really, from the grant funding picture for this project, so far, all 3 of the grants are ultimately federal funding sources. So we really don't want to go federal anymore because we really can't have federal money matching federal money. So we really wouldn't want to target another federal source, we would want to go state.
That's where that Connect program is gonna be really important.
When you put on where the money is, what it is, what it can be used for, maybe dates that we need to make decisions by
Mhm.
as well in this documents that way, because I know some of our time critical.
Yeah.
No, this is very helpful. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any other questions? And we have a lot to talk about at fall planning.
It sounds like it's coming on fast.
Yeah.
All right. We'll
Thank you.
talk
This is,
tomorrow.
Yeah. I figured we probably would, yes.
yeah, this is very helpful.
Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
You're welcome to stick around because these meetings are very exciting. But
I don't think I'm gonna take you up on it.
so moving forward, let's go with Genevieve on waterfront parking, year-to-date
Alright.
report.
Yeah, this is really just an effort to provide you all with sort of an immediate impact report. On May 16th, we passed a resolution that changed a few things on the
Thank
paid parking system on the waterfront. And we just wanted to give you a little bit of a how's it going and what has it done report. So in the memo, I made note of some of the higher level changes that we made. We expanded the paid parking areas to include the hook and the marina. We changed our payment methods. We removed all of those kiosks and moved to a mobile payment only system. We did make some rate and fee increases, both on metered parking and passes. And some changes to the type of vehicles that we allow to park on in West Portway. So this is just a summary list of the changes that were made, and we're going to tell you a little bit about the results. What we've done is, since our fiscal year splits the busy tourist season, it's kind of easier to talk about this stuff on a calendar, compare calendar year to calendar year. So when we get to spring planning, these numbers will look different. It's important for me to say out loud to you that these are not audited numbers. These are compiled from various reports from the various systems that we use for the parking system. And what we're really looking at here is just paid parking system itself in isolation. So we're not going to be giving you parks maintenance costs and things like that. We're just talking about the parking system itself. So wanted to start with the annual pass sales. We are down on both the number sold and the dollar amount of it. We do have a little bit of a thing that is important to understand comparing 2022 to 2023. At the event site booth, the kids sold passes last year. They did not sell passes this year. Last year, they sold 468 season passes there. So that could be something that contributes to this. We also did increase the cost of the passes. So just a couple of things that might be explaining why we were down 22% on the number of passes sold and about 13% on the amount, about the dollar value. Next slide. Okay, so metered parking was up quite a bit. 2022, our total income from metered parking was around 101,000. So far this year, these numbers all go to October 13th is when I pulled the numbers. We're at 191,515. And I have a little note there again that talks about the event site. At the event site last year, we sold 52,000, almost 53,000 in day passes. That transaction this year turned into paying all day for the whole day on your mobile device. So I kind of see that as moving from a pass sale to a metered sale. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that we didn't have really, 90% growth in, there was some transference of money that was made a different way last
Could I
year.
ask you a question
Yeah.
on that? The duration there, you got 2022, that's the entire 12-month period?
Yes, sir.
And year-to-date 2023 is not.
Right.
Okay,
And
so
throughout this whole report, it's just letting you
Okay.
know. And the changes that we made
the resolution was approved on May 16th. It took us until about June 20th to turn all those changes on.
Yeah, but if you project out, the 88% change
Yeah.
is gonna be much bigger than that.
Exactly, because we'll have a full, 12 months of these conditions next year. Whereas what I'm really reporting on is 3 months of activity this year. So thank you for clarifying that. So metered parking is up with some shift from the event site booth last year and a smaller number of months accounting for it. So that's good news. Next slide. I wanted to give you specifically information about the new zones. We added the Hook and the Marina. And this graph shows you that at the Hook, we had about 7,200 transactions. And for that, I actually took out the kiosk transactions that had happened since January to June, so that you could really just look at what was the new business we created with this new policy. And so that's the money that was generated at the Hook and also at the Marina so far this year. Again, after the change that occurred in June. So that's new money and that's helpful. Next one. And this is just to show you the total metered parking by zone. So you can see, the 2022 number for the Hook and West Portway is really what we used to call Zone 6, which is just that one block of West Portway where we were parking trucks, except for on the weekends where we were parking passenger vehicles. So that's a big road. Jensen is down a little bit. The event site again way up, but some of that is the transference of the day pass sales that turned into an all-day payment on the mobile payment. Waterfront streets and Nichols Basin about the same, and new money with the Marina there. And then, next one. So this is just a graph to show you the metered parking by month. This is the 2022 July and this year's July to show visually just the difference. Next one. Okay, so then I also wanted to show, you the difference in how we addressed issuing parking tickets. Last year, we had really just one full-time equivalent of parking enforcement. And we had kind of a different approach in how he was directed to interact with people and how much do you help them before you write the ticket, that sort of thing. So pretty low volume of all the different types of violations and the citations. This year we had 3 employees on parking enforcement. Were they full-time, Bryce, part-time seasonal? We had 2 plus John later. And so this kind of shows you going from $4,000 to nearly 53 for non-payment. Overtime parking and unauthorized spaces. So really a huge increase in the tickets, just based on staff. But I also wanted to show you on the next slide. So these are the payments received. So including late fees over time. The payments received for tickets in 2022 is actually more than the tickets issued value. And this is the payments we've received for tickets so far this year. Next slide. I wanted to show you also how we address ticket dismissals with removing the kiosks and moving the mobile payment. We were really forgetting about tickets. And there are a few things that we did. I just wanted you to know why we would dismiss a ticket, how much that was worth, and what were the general reasons why. So courtesy dismissal. These are actual options that I select from a drop-down menu when I dismiss the ticket. And trying to track the reasons that also identify sort of problems in our citation issuing system. So a courtesy is usually extenuating circumstances. This summer, most of those 53 were elderly folks who just could not get
through the right process with the mobile payments. And just we're so frustrated and so mad that we just wanted to give them a better day and dismiss their ticket. Or they were somebody that actually had something happen on the waterfront, maybe an accident, maybe they were involved in an emergency, and it just, you know, for courtesy, we would dismiss that ticket. The valid dispute is, these are folks that actually paid. But there is in our citation processing, in our citation scanning system, which is the handheld that the officer is actually using to check for payment by plates. It's called Civic Smart. If a customer enters their payment and they enter a hyphen in the license plate number or a space character, it doesn't see their payment. So the parking enforcement officer has to actually scan the plate, shows no payment. Well, let's see if they put a space or a hyphen and, you know, do a couple of searches. So when a customer can show me, hey, I paid, what happened? I put an extra character on my license plate or something. That happened 248 times, and we dismissed that ticket as their dispute was granted. They actually had paid, they legit paid.
I have a question, Jenny.
Yeah.
If somebody has the annual pass, is there a way that you can put their license plate in the system so it shows they have a pass? I helped one of the parking enforcers. Yeah, he
And what
missed,
for those, that would be included in these two.
yeah.
We had Daryl and I, yes, we know which one you're talking about. So really, when that customer would say, what the heck, I got a ticket and I have a pass, here's a picture, we would dismiss that without question. You know, we wouldn't argue that at all. This one, PADs is an option in our drop-down menu. It's actually the court administrator dismiss. And I use this one for those folks that were legit trying to pay with the mobile system, but they just couldn't. And so instead of having them pay a $40 ticket, I said, you know, just pay me for the time you were parked. And they all said, that's fair, you know, send a check for $5. They were there for $2 hours. And we dismiss a $40 ticket, and that's fair. So that happened 101 times, just so you are aware of how that was working. Okay, next slide. So in parking staff expenditures year to year, we had an increase of almost 23.5%. And that includes taxes, PERS, workers' comp for the parking enforcement staff and the event side booth kids. And then these are the two main contracts, vendor contracts that we have for our parking system. Calais and Flover are the payment accepting, and so they were the kiosks, and also they are now the mobile payment option. And Duncan is the enforcement side. And so by removing the kiosk expense, very quickly we have a large reduction in expense, and that will continue because we're not paying for really expensive maintenance and parts contract that we had for those kiosks. Duncan is up, and that's tied to increased citations. So we pay them according to how many citations are issued, and we had a huge increase in citations, so we had an increase in this. But overall, a reduction in costs. We also bought 2 new handhelds this year, and that was a Duncan thing, so that will smooth out next year. So just a quick, you know, back of the napkin ballpark. We think the improvement so far this year over all of last year is about 40.47% increase. So.
And that's
Looking
partial
good.
year. That's not the end of the year, so it's
Yeah.
gonna get better.
So we moved really fast. I mean, from May 16th to June 20th was, you know, we implemented it really fast. You know, prior changes to the parking system, we studied it a lot and we thought about it a lot more. We didn't think about it a whole lot this year. We just wanted to move fast. We're on, you know, this trajectory of a goal by the end of June of 2026 to replace toll revenue. This was just one strategy to do that. So I think it'll help a lot next year. But we do have a list of questions we'd like you to consider for fall planning. Should we lower the prices in the marina parking lot? And that could be both the hourly rate or the season pass. We can do a marina only season pass instead of, since we're moving so fast, we just use the event site pass. We can do something with a little more warning, specific for the marina. And should we offer an alternate pay method at the boat launch, maybe a drop box, something, or people can put any cash in an envelope or a check or something, because these guys are having a hard time with the cell phones. Although I do want to say we've had thousands and thousands of successful transactions. It's just, the senior discount, I wanted you guys to think that through a little bit. I know that came up a couple of times. And it's totally possible, but it's, how do we verify how much do we take a person's word for it? And do you want to specify a senior discount solely for the marina and leave the event side alone? We want to kind of look at maybe some more than expected potential loss of revenue if we were to have a senior pass over there. And should we return to selling the daily and the annual passes at the event site booth, or bring the kids out of it completely and reduce that expense? So those are things we want to talk through at fall planning. That's it.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Anything that we can bring to you in fall planning regarding this topic that can help you with decision making?
Does this mobile payment app give us statistics on the number of people that buy parking passes that are Hood River County residents?
No.
I just kind of wonder, like, what percentage of people paying parking fees are constituents and how many are from outside?
The best report that I could give you for that would be the online sales of passes. We can give you a zip code report.
Okay,
So that wouldn't be the metered parking, but at least we could give you a zip code report on who's buying the annual passes.
great.
That's easy.
And I guess, it sounds like there's a lot of flexibility with the parking, with the Flowbird. And I know right now, event site passes are transferable. I've heard it from many people that they don't think that it's super fair for, someone who's renting out their home for the summer and the people just pass their passes on to the next.
Yeah.
Can we get a little bit better data for fall planning on ways to kind of still encourage families to be able to share, but not outside?
We used to have a discount based on household,
Uh-huh,
and it was really, really hard to manage.
okay,
But, Daryl and I have talked about why are they transferable at all?
right. Okay,
Maybe they should be tied to a license plate. But so it's sort of this evolution, just so you know that it came from, we used to have it transferable tied to a household. There was a huge administrative overhead burden to manage that for very limited benefit. Change to, let's make it transferable to everybody.
mhm,
And so that is something to think
Okay.
about. Maybe your
Okay.
pass is tied to your vehicle.
You just be tied to like 2 to 3 license plates.
maybe so, yeah,
Yeah, so we can try to look into that.
okay,
for planning.
yeah, well, thank
Or
you.
7 to accommodate my cars.
Accommodate all of my cars. Okay, well, if no other questions, then let's move forward to the treaty. MOA potential loss of fishing access during construction, Mr. Fox, this should be pretty
Yeah,
quick
you
brief,
bring-
it's more of a,
You bring that diagram up. So Mike and I have been meeting with Umatilla tribe several times, and I think we're getting close to an MOA, which basically pays the tribe for not fishing in a safety zone, which we've now designed as 200 yards upstream from the current bridge, 300 yards downstream from the current bridge. So as we were negotiating with the tribes, what became very evident, they understand the safety zone. They're okay with the concept of the safety zone, but they would still like to be able to fish in areas that we can give them access to. So we've discussed an approach where we will pay them to not fish in any of the area. And then on a monthly basis during construction, we'll have a meeting with them and they may request that they would like to fish for 3 days in a zone called U1-4, which is between piers 1 and 4 upstream of the current bridge. We take a look at it, we look at the construction schedule. Yes, that'll work. We give them access for 3 days in that particular zone. We propose that we get a credit for their use of that. And that credit then is applied to the second year charge for not fishing in the entire safety zone. That seems like there's something there that they're interested in doing. To help us with that, what we're looking at is stenciling on each of the piers a number. So it starts out on the Oregon side, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through on the Washington side of 20. Of course, the new bridge would pay for stenciling such a letter on both the upstream and the downstream side of a pier. That allows the fishermen to have ready knowledge of where are they, where can they fish, and then where are they, kind of a thing. So we're asking consideration from the port to allow the authority to stencil in, and it's probably, I'm guessing, we got to define it yet, couple feet high number, so it can be seen, 700 yards up and downstream from the bridge. We probably wouldn't do this until late 24, early 25, because we don't see construction starting until the end of 25. You may have a concern where you see a zone there, D1 through 4 on the downstream side, encompasses some area in the marina. There's a no chance, I can't say that, it's an infinitesimally small chance that we would ever give them access to that particular area. Because there's going to be boat travel coming in and out of the marina and other things going on there. So that's going to be a dead zone.
I've never seen them fishing
Mm-mm.
in pretty much any of those zones.
Does the port have control of the entire U1 through 4 area? As far as, does the hotel, I worry about the hotel having some access there or some.
It's actually, you can't see it, it's upstream. It's 200 yards, and I think we're still downstream of the hotel, so I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Their little pier area there.
And I think for the port's sake, it's really more about allowing the numbers to be painted on the piers.
Yeah.
That's because the project will be getting all the permits and everything else that it needs to.
And you've checked with the Coast Guard, they don't have a problem.
We did get a manual from them. It's about 700 pages long, as you can imagine, so. That's what Ryan just started reviewing that document.
They didn't direct you to a specific page.
Would that agreement have an end date, or it's just during construction?
During
This
construction.
access,
Yeah.
it would not be a permanent.
It won't be a permanent easement there. It'll go through dismantlement of the current bridge.
Yeah.
So theoretically, new bridge, October 29. Roughly 2 years later, October 31, the old bridge is gone. And then all of the zones collapse. So just informational, what we'd like to know, if the port has real heartburn about allowing us to stencil on these numbers, we need to know so we can look at an alternate approach. To try and identify.
No heartburn. I'm good. No heartburn.
Okay.
Okay.
You good? Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, and then existing bridge risk review, which we're also moving the Kaufman engineering discussion, correct? Yes, down to,
Great,
Including
thank
that
you.
topic.
So really, this is a opportunity to kind of give a recap of the first internal bridge committee meeting. I believe we've met twice. Once was with all three engineers, and another one was with Harvey Kaufman. But really, the focal point was to really focus on where are the real risky aspects of the bridge. And so what's in your packet is kind of an assessment based upon with the three engineers' help. Both Commissioner Beaker and Fox reviewed it, as did staff. And so what you have in your packet is a summary of the projects or areas of operations that have potential risk. And so Commissioner Fox, do you want
Yeah,
to
maybe-
walk through it, or?
Yeah, maybe we jump through it just a little bit. Some of this you guys have already heard about, so we'll just blow through that, like. Yeah, we've all talked about for a long time, trucks exceeding specified weight and impact on the bridge. So that's the first one. There's not much that we're gonna do about that, frankly. The second one is high percentage of the traffic is exceeding the speed limit. We talked about adding a speed camera. And I think staff is bringing that to,
We'll work on it. Yeah,
yeah,
get some
fall
quotes.
planning. The next one, some of them that you haven't heard about. Is, we talked about putting together an inspection program for high-risk members. So we don't wait for every 2 years for ODOT to come in and look at it. If we know there's a high-risk members, maybe we ought to be out there looking at it more frequently. So there's a task to do that, identify it and put together an inspection type of a program for that. All the engineers suggested that was probably a good idea. The next one is related to bridge shutdowns, communication to users, and this is where we've had numerous cases in the past where we've had to shut down the bridge because of an accident on it. And there's no real easy way right now to stop traffic coming on the bridge from the Washington side.
Mhm.
There is on the Oregon side, but not on the Washington side. And many times what has happened is that we've loaded up the bridge on the Washington side. They have to sit there until it gets cleared. That's one thing if we got a problem on an accident on the bridge. If we start to lose the integrity of the bridge, that severity goes up significantly. So we talked about that. And what we're suggesting, and I think it's coming to fall planning as well, is putting a reader board that is electronic that can be typed in at the toll booth that instantaneously shows back over on the Washington side, bridge closed because of accident, or whatever they decide they need to do. But it's a quick way to try and stop the traffic on the Washington side. Right now, I think staff has to call out somebody on the other side of the bridge because you can't get across it. So that eliminates that kind of a problem.
Can we put an arm there?
You could put an arm. I think the consensus of what we talked about is it's probably more important to put a message up there.
Okay.
Because some of these guys will go around the arm.
Somebody goes back off the bridge too.
Right.
Break it.
They don't care about the arm.
Well, you want that on there to get out.
That's true.
Well, and sometimes the tow truck's coming from the Washington side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The other
Really
big
great.
surprise, the guardrails on the lift span are the weakest guardrails we have on the bridge. Actually, the guardrails on the rest of the bridge are pretty heavy duty. We haven't had trucks or anything go through them. We've had trucks climb them and cause damage. But we started talking about the lift span itself. There is a chance that a car could go through the lift span. It's the weakest part. So we talked about doing an engineering study to come up with what would we have to do to beef up that railing section there. It gets a little bit more complex in that it's not just putting additional railing or on the structure, you have to look at the weight and balance, and you have to change some things all the way up on the top, so it gets a little bit more complex. But we had it in here to go ahead and do an engineering study, give us some options and go forward with that. Since that time, I've personally driven across the bridge many times, and I'm really watching how long does it take me to get through the span. And I'm thinking, I think we need to do maybe a little bit different risk assessment of that piece of it. When you consider it's 15 miles an hour, you consider the rub rail still there on that particular section. And if you're going 15 miles an hour, are you really going to punch through the guardrail? I have personally my doubts, but I think it's worth spending a little bit of money with engineering to do a little bit more in-depth study of that, because I think if we go the other way, which I think we've got to do something there, because we now know it's the weakest part of the bridge if something happens. But I personally think we're probably talking $100,000 to $200,000 by the time you're all done beefing up that little section of the bridge. And would it be better spent taking that money and either doing other modifications to the bridge or putting it against the new bridge? And I don't know. And that's why I think we ought to modify Kaufman's contract language that we have here and put the two topics on there to redesign the supports, to add a third one and release them to do a better risk assessment of what's the likelihood of punching through it. And get that result back. And then if we all decide we should go forward, then turn them loose to do the design.
Okay.
The next one.
So we would just need Kaufman to come back to us with an additional of the 62,000.
Yeah.
To add that into it, or.
Yeah, and then just release that piece of it to them.
Okay.
Right. Okay, the next one is on ramp corrosion, which is on both sides of the bridge. If you remember, we spent some money to redo both of them. That's still the weakest part. If you remember, we couldn't get that done quick enough. There was water intrusion into that deck, into the rebar. The concern is chemical reaction with the rebar and flaking out of the concrete. So we suggested, or the engineer suggested, that we do an annual inspection. So we put together a little program to annually go out and look. Where you're going to really see it is underneath. But if we start to see any cracks or anything on the surface, we got to quickly seal it. So to keep water intrusion from seeping down through it. Okay, the next real one is 2 down. Lift mechanism, mechanical and electrical components do not meet AASTO code requirements. In other words, we've got some equipment sitting all the way up at the top, and it's a motor, it's a gearbox, a bunch of pulleys and stuff. They don't match. They were never designed to work together, which is not a big surprise because it's 100 years old. Okay, so something got changed out. Well, they don't talk nicely together. And as an example, the motor is rated that it could put such torque on that gearbox, it'll rip it right out. So they've got limits set on the motor to try and play it down. What we're saying there is that for maintenance going forward, none of this is written down, really. It needs to be written down into a procedure. So if maintenance has to go up there, they've got a maintenance procedure to rely on, and if you find yourself in this condition, here's what you ought to be doing. Now, I think the good news is, you know, thus far, when we've had a problem, you've actually called engineering before you went too far into it, and that's the right thing to do. But that's the wrong thing
long-term.
on a long-term basis. You have to have your own procedures and for training and other people. So we're recommending that engineering put together a series of procedures that, and some diagrams that show this interface.
So with our own procedures, will we be compliant?
You'll never be compliant, but you will understand where you are, and you will understand the limits that have been designed into this hodgepodge of equipment. And to me, that's more important right now, because if you don't understand those interconnections and the relationships, you could walk in, do something that in fact make things much, much worse.
It's a way to mitigate not being able to get into compliance.
The other one is develop a well program for the bridge steel deck grading and stringers. You know, we're gonna be spending more time out there welding the deck. There's a thought that we need to have an inspection on the deck on a regular basis. And then make sure all our welders that are welding out there are in fact certified. When we asked the question in front of all the engineers, actually, one of the engineers brought up that he wouldn't be surprised if we haven't had welds done on the bridge that are not from certified welders, and he started going, from a legal point of view, that's not a good thing.
I did a little research on that, and all of the Bulldog Bulldog welders are all certified.
Okay.
So, and we've used them for about 5 years. Unsure about what happened prior to there.
Yeah.
But over the last 5 years, I feel very confident that Bulldog's welders are certified.
Then there's a couple other ones here that we won't talk about it. It's more in detail as far as adjusting live load and bearing contacts. Get alignment of the bridge. It's starting to move out, which happens all the time.
So basically what you're asking is for a modification to the contract, asking Kaufman to take a look at all of these things that the bridge replacement, or not bridge, the bridge repair and maintenance committee has brought up and bring us some numbers.
Yeah, and the other piece of this is that in a general category is getting procedures in place, getting training programs in place, and then getting an assessment program in place.
Okay.
So you want to make sure people are trained, and then you got to assess it to make sure they're actually following the procedure. And that's all part of this as well.
Commissioner, one thing that we do want to hold on to the Kaufman contract is the update on the scour condition report.
Yeah, that's the other one. As a result of the core sampling that we did for the new bridge, we got an indication that we may have an impact on the old bridge.
Mhm.
And let's see if I hit this right. So we've got 10 or 12 spots across the river that we've drilled down. Some of them go as over 100 feet down. What we see is that in certain cases, especially on the Oregon side, they drilled down, went through sediment and kind of gravel, and they hit a hard spot. Instead of stopping, they pushed on through, and they found some more gravel basically underneath it, and went another 40 to 60 feet until you hit 100 feet, until you hit bedrock. We have some thoughts that our current bridge is based on that first crust.
I think it's a footing you hit.
So where this comes into play, there was a scour report done where you know, we're looking at currents and how that current runs against the piers and takes material away from it. And the report that came to you says, not a problem, everything looked good. But they didn't know that the pile is not setting on bedrock, it's setting on a crust. So we're suggesting that Kaufman take a look at the drilling samples and compare it to his current scour report to see if there's an impact.
Okay.
Did I say that right?
Mhm.
Close enough.
And then, so I think that's the one item that we would like to get.
Yes.
approved, because it's actually very helpful with the grant applications that are currently out to get that updated. And then that can be submitted to the feds and show that, actually, there are other issues here, another reason to speed up the.
Yeah, so
So do we have a dollar amount for just that scour?
Yeah, it's 16, it's basically 16,600, not to exceed amount would be 16,600.
and it's in his quote that he gave us.
Okay,
It was
I think it's item 2.
Yeah.
okay. So when we go to action items, we could move
Yeah,
to get that piece and then just direct staff to get new numbers. If everyone's in agreement to encompass all of the other items for next meeting.
and
We
based
just
upon
felt
the,
that you guys needed to understand what we were doing with the risk assessment, because there was a few surprises in there that I think you need to know about.
and we just, the one other thing too, is just depending on the scope of it, we may need to do a competitive.
Good.
hearing.
Good.
So.
Okay.
This is a small enough amount with the new laws that were passed that we can just do that tonight.
Okay,
So that'll be the staff recommendation.
any questions from anyone? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fox, for all that you do for our bridge. It's a lot
Well,
of stuff.
Thor was involved in this.
And Tor.
Oh, I didn't add my comments. I largely concur with Commissioner Fox. Just a few other things to add to sum up. More of an ongoing inspection schedule is important. The training is really important. Having standard operating procedures for the bridge is and dealing with not just bridge operation, but potential emergencies and closures. That's very important. Just a few additional comments. I'm ambivalent on the issue of ticketing speeders on the bridge. I don't know that the cost benefit analysis makes sense there, but it's certainly worth considering. It's also interestingly possible that if people are concerned about ticketing, they might slow down, making the guardrail issue on the lift span even less of an issue. I was frankly just a little bit uncomfortable that we had one of our experts engineers who said, oh, I'm really concerned about these guardrails. And all of a sudden now we're looking at a contract for that particular engineering firm to do this big, thing with the guardrails. So I like the idea very much of constraining that contract to saying, take a look at the scour report and just do a risk assessment of the guardrails instead of launching into all this more involved business. That makes a lot more sense to me. So I don't think there's anything else I want to add. The biggest concern from Mr. Libby, for instance, was just the ramps at both ends, that issue with water getting in and affecting the rebar and such. That was his biggest concern, just to kind of share that. And so just better ongoing inspection, kind of keeping an eye on that. So.
Now, it sounds like it was really helpful to have all of the different engineers in the room.
It was.
Able to talk.
It was.
So
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for you guys.
And I think, who was it? The one firm said that they could even have one of the engineers, one of their engineers, Mr. Yang, was just like an expert on the lift mechanism and stuff. And that he might be able to come out and do some training on operations and help put together that procedure.
Oh, great.
Which would be outstanding. So those are just my additional thoughts, but yeah, it was helpful.
Good. Okay. Okay, on to the executive director report.
Really nothing to add. I was in conferences most of last week, and so everything in the report is current. I don't really have anything additional to add.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Kevin?
Quick question, you say there's an ODOT's having a tour, a historic
Oh,
US
right.
30 tour on the 9th. Where is that happening?
That is up at the Mitchell Point.
The new tunnel that they're doing.
Exactly. You can see the davits or the windows in the side of the cliff. If you want to go get the high vis vest and the hard hat on and walk around and see it. I think they're extending that to elected officials.
Okay.
So if you're interested, just let me know and I can get you signed up.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Committee reports, Bridge Committee, we kind of got an update on that, unless there's anything you want to add. Airport Committee tour.
Yeah, well, the most important thing is that the airport committee voted, had a pretty thoroughgoing discussion about the candidates to be on the airport committee. And took a vote, and the vote winners, leaders were Doug Knight and Tad McGear.
Okay,
So I don't know, we can certainly discuss that, but I would like to move that we appoint Mr. Knight and Mr. McGear to the Airport Advisory Committee for a 3-year term.
Does that have to be a motion made to do something like that?
okay. Well, I mean, I guess we're almost at action items, so if anyone would like to make a motion to approve those two individuals.
Those two are your recommendation?
Yeah.
I move we appoint Doug Knight and Tad McGear to the Airport Advisory Committee for 3-year term.
Yeah, second.
Any discussion?
So here's the opportunity to ask questions. I would like to point out that that Mr. Knight was on the Bend City Council for many years and also served on the advisory committee for the Redmond Airport, so has some experience and involvement with airports. And Mr. McGear is one of the founders of In Situ and it has a aviation business, very involved in aviation business. And that's exactly the kind of experience that I think will be very helpful on that committee for ideas to grow the airport in positive ways. So I think both of them bring a lot of potential.
Yeah, thank you for sending all of the resumes. It was good to read through, so. Okay, all in favor? Aye. They're approved. All right, second action item, Genevieve, approved grant agreement with U.S. Economic Development Administration for waterfront roads and utilities.
Right, so third time's a charm. This is, we've made 3 efforts to fund the Lot 1 roads and infrastructure project with the EDA, and really want to say thank you to Wes, our regional administrator at the EDA for coaching us along. So we did receive the letter notification of award of a grant. We have until October 25th to accept the grant. It does specifically in the scope of work call out East Tinker Way and the relocation of North First Street. So Kevin and I wanted to call out for you some of the conditions in the grant agreement. One that we have until October 25th to accept the grant. The grant award is on a reimbursement basis. So unlike those 2 other prior awards, they're not sending us a check right away until we spend some money. Changes to the scope and the budget can be made with the approval of the grant officer. Really, any additional funding sources have to be non-federal. So as Kevin said, we're looking at Connect Oregon and we're looking at Business Oregon as potential funding to help the port offset its obligation in this agreement for 1.7 million in match. Time extensions are also possible. With the grant officer approval, we have 2 years from the agreement date to have some significant construction underway. Full or partial termination is possible with grant officer approval. But we really do have to kind of meet some minimum tolerance levels for the EDA on what we're delivering. And so I think it's important for you to hear sort of what they're really looking for in tangible public benefit beyond just those two roads. As you're discussing, not doing East Anchor Way and maybe doing the roundabout instead, I don't see any loss of benefit at all to this particular funder. And I can actually write that letter in my head right now of thanks to KPFF's work, we can show that this is traffic flow improvement that achieves the same goals. So it's important to talk about those goals. That transit hub is important for this grant. They do need a bus pull out, and they need to see a benefit on commuter routes to work. A lot of the benefit for this program goes beyond that block, in that the Columbia Gorge Regional Public Transit System sees this as a central hub for people to switch buses all the way from, out in the Dalles to Portland and Trout Lake to Parkdale. So it is a facility that EDA wants to see happen. It doesn't have to happen right in that one spot of the drawing on East Anchor Way, but that is an important component. Also, they want to see shovel-ready sites, shovel-ready developable sites as a result of this project. So those stub outs are important, however they go. And then, like I said, the traffic flow and the traffic flow improvements in this grant, the benefit of them, including the job creation numbers, this is kind of a unique program in EDA in that it's public works construction only. It's specifically for roads and infrastructure. We're not building buildings with this money, but the benefit of this project for that program was that it showed traffic flow improvements for the industrial users in addition to the recreational users. And the roundabout project versus East Anchor Way, if we're to choose between those two, is certainly we can still illustrate that this is a way to get the trucks to get that left-hand turn and get to the industrial side unimpeded. And that's what we needed to do. Usually EDA, you have to promise, pretty high employee job creation for every, 1,000 square feet, of your project. This one's different. We really, between two industrial neighbors of the project and Columbia Area Transit themselves, it was only like 4 jobs created. So that's not really what they were going for, but they were going for roads and utility infrastructure that still supports industry. And so that's important to show. And easily we could illustrate that with a different road project. But all of that is subject to their approval. So caveat there. And I think that's it. Kevin, am I leaving anything out?
I think you've got it. I mean, I think what we'll need to do with KPFF is get them to develop some quick preliminary cost estimates for some of these other elements. But I think the key point is staff is recommending that the board approve this, not submit any reimbursements until the path forward is fully understood.
So by approving it, that says, yeah, we accept the grant. It doesn't preclude us from changing the scope in the grant.
No,
We
and
can ask.
yeah.
Yes.
And it doesn't guarantee that they would approve any change we request, but we can, at least we can say as staff, the changes that we're talking about don't really materially affect the deliverables that we promised them in terms of the public benefit.
So let me
Especially
play-
with the support of ODOT.
Right.
Yeah, let me play wordsmith here a little bit. So the grant says Anchor Way extension plus,
Specifically
Realignment
says
of
those
First
roads.
Street.
Yeah.
let's say realignment of First Street exceeds what we thought it was gonna cost.
Mhm.
So could we not say, we're still gonna use that grant, but priority number 1 is First Street
Mhm. Right.
and stop there?
Yeah, and there is a 15% contingency built into that budget too for overruns, so not
Oh,
enough to
we-
build a
we gotta
roundabout,
spend
but
money.
yeah. I mean, I think really what we should do is if we can possibly make a decision this year on what the roads and the utilities infrastructure, and really say this, as a funder, they would much rather have us change our scope for a better, more long-term solution than try to charge forward with something that we already know is maybe not the best. So I think we can,
I'm almost thinking, okay, We kind of meet it by adjusting. First rate. And if we have money left over, if we decide.
Yeah.
Maybe we throw that into the roundabout.
Yeah, that's how I look at it too.
Okay. Any other questions about the approval of the grant? If not, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve EDA grant agreement investment number 077790795 in the amount of $1,981,419 for the Hood River Waterfront Roads and Utilities Infrastructure Project.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Nice job.
And then, I guess the last action item would be if someone would like to make a motion to approve a contract with Kaufman Engineering in the amount of 16,600 for the
Update on the Scour critical report.
update on the Scour Critical Report.
Do we want to make a notation? I don't mind Commissioner Beaker's note on the guardrails exactly be noted in this, or can we just
We're
go
gonna
that
come back to that.
in?
We'll come back to that element. That's one of the items that's why we pulled it off the consent
Consent.
calendar, because there was a lot more in there.
Yeah,
And so we're not going to approve that tonight.
Okay.
We're just gonna focus on the Scour critical report and come back with a better. comprehensive-
to.
Correct, and probably do a competitive process.
Okay.
For even for the risk analysis of the span.
If you want to partial it out, we can certainly do that, but we can, that might even be small enough it can be a direct procurement.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay.
I shall recommend.
Okay,
second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Right.
Okay. And then we have commission call.
Well, I think there's one more.
We still have the FBO agreement.
Oh, the FBO agreement. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Amendment number 3 to the FBO agreement. Does Greg want to touch on that?
Staff has nothing to add. The memo is provided in your package.
Okay.
Hand it back to the commission for discussion.
Okay. Commissioner Fox.
Yeah, I
You
do
were
have
on that.
one comment on it, and as long as we all understand it, we go forward. I've been critical on the fuel surcharge piece of this thing, trying to get it into a percentage at even 10 cents a gallon, which is 100% increase from the current current contract. Put it into context here. We have to do a soak test on the new fuel system. That's in the document. That soak test is going to be $9,500. We all understand how many gallons it's going to take at 10 cents a gallon just to pay for the soak test. Not even talking about putting the system together, building the system, building the foundation. There is absolutely no way we're going to recover our costs anytime soon at 10 cents a gallon. It's going to take us a year to get back the soak test money, $9,500. We have to sell 95,000 gallons of fuel to pay for the soak test.
Might be 2 years.
The FBO is gonna buy the fuel if it's deemed acceptable, so that $9,500 will come down the cost of the fuel. So we put out $9,500 for the test. We own 6,000 gallons at this point. If it gets a green light, the FBO is gonna buy that 6,000 gallons from the port. So that $9,500 is gonna come down significantly.
Okay. That wasn't in here, so I didn't see that, but the other piece of it is, are we positioning ourselves with the FBO? Are we doing a fair deal here? I don't know what the current extension is. Are we getting any more money from the FBO by extending them a couple more years?
We don't currently get any money from the FBO. The FBO provides a service to the port. As a contractor, they used to be paid $25,000 a year. Now they're not paid anything. So they provide a service, and in exchange for that service, they get a discounted rate for the spaces that they do services for the airfield, say maintenance.
I'm just suggesting, has somebody looked at this? And do we feel we got the right deal at the airport? If we do, fine. I think we have an opportunity here. How long is this extension for? 3
3
3
years
years.
as provided in the contract that exists.
Should we do something different? We're gonna lock ourselves in for another 3 years on this airport.
I believe the last time we did this was in the last couple of years and we looked this up when we went out and did a. Request for bids to be the FBO. How many responses did we get? I think the answer is 1.
So I can give a little bit of historical perspective and also maybe an overview that'll help make this an apples to apples type of comparison. The FBO contract, whatever that was available, was apparently put in one or two national magazines, but it wasn't really communicated to other FBO companies in the region. Because I've actually had, for instance, the FBO manager in Camas come to me and say, hey, I would love to run the FBO out there. Do you guys need? And I was like, no, it was a couple of years ago. You didn't know about that? Nope. Talk to the guy that runs Kelso FBO. Hey, and he's like, oh yeah, I would love to expand it into Hood River. You guys need? I'm like, where were you when this was, no. So, I mean, I think there was just, those guys weren't reading wherever the ad was posted. So there was maybe a lost opportunity there, but I've been trying to make sense of this FBO contract and looking at it and talking this airport management association conference was very useful, talking to a variety of airport managers and how they do things. And talking to some airport managers whose attitude is, I don't know why you'd have an FBO. Why don't you guys just take the fuel money for yourself? And having other airport managers say, have a different attitude. Oh, you're really lucky to have an FBO, And so every airport situation is different. If we look at like, what does the port give or lose? Like what's our skin in the game? And then what we get for it. So what do we pay? We give away our fuel sales. The flowage fee that we get is a tiny bit of money. I guess it's meant to represent maybe accounting expenses or something like that. What does that fuel revenue look like on an annual basis? Maybe $40,000 to $60,000 a year. Okay. So we give that to our FBO. We give the FBO a free FBO building, and we give the FBO a maintenance building for, I think, $500 a month. So those are the things, and we give them tie down fees, which at the current utilization rate at $30 per tie down per month for, I don't know, I'm not great at basic math, but I can do this real quick. $30 times so like 17 sites or something like that, it's 12 months. It's about $6,000 a year. Okay. So we give the FBO these things. In exchange for that, we don't need 1 to 3 full-time employees plus benefits at the airport taking care of these things. In response to FBO contracts to make scenic flights and flight instruction and maintenance available at the airport, and they've got somebody there during business hours to help you. If you had trouble getting fuel, you can get fuel, or you can call a fuel truck over or whatever. So they do provide these line services. And so you just have to look at it and you're like, okay, well, totaling up the value of the fuel and the tie downs, and maybe some lost rental revenue, it's probably going to end up being under $100,000 a year is what we sort of give forth. And what do we get for that? We've got those line services, the airport staffed, and so on and so forth. And so counterfactual situation, if we didn't have an FBO, what would we have to pay? Would we want somebody at the airport? I mean, this is the other thing. There's different ways you can run airports, right? I've flown into plenty of places where there's nobody there. Fuel self-serve. There's a key coded pilot lounge. You go in there, you can take a nap, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, and that's it. And so those airports don't have a ton of overhead. So I think the FBO provides good value for what they do. It's a question that the port needs to ask about. What do we want the airport to be and what do we want to pay for that? The airport committee has begun the process right now of developing a laser focused mission statement and vision statement for the airport. I'm hoping our new members can contribute to that process. How do they see the airport developing? Some people say, oh, well, we want to focus and leverage recreation. We want to maybe try to bring in more charter flights and things like that. If we're going to go that way, we really do want a full service FBO providing the services. That's a huge draw. It's a huge benefit. So it just depends, and so we're kind of, I feel like this is terrible timing in a sense, right? Because we're kind of right in the middle of this process of wrestling it out, figuring out what the future for the airport is. And do we want an FBO there? Is that part of the vision?
Support.
And here's the contract. So there's kind of an overview.
I
of some
think
of the
you,
different
in a very quick period of time, you've been able to get your hands around it.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, instead of extending this for 3 years, we do a 1-year option? That allows you guys to do further studies and decide what you want. If you're happy with the FBO as it is, we extend it for another 2 years.
Do you think that, I don't know that FBO is gonna sign a 1-year on?
So here's part of the concern that, we're kind of digging into all these issues and then this deal is coming up right now. I feel really, honestly, frankly, I feel bad. It's like, it's bad business to yank a rug out of them at like 11th hour and be like, whoop, because they're running their business in good faith, but I'm conflicted. On the other hand, they're a business. They're not a charity. Like, they're there to make money, and we're here to manage this public resource to the best of our ability. Right now, I had some really nice talks with Jeff Renard, who's the airport manager in Dallas. And he is a pretty objective kind of person with respect to the whole issue of how we're operating our airport. And he's a great resource. And he said, look, if you guys decide you want to run the airport yourselves, it's going to cost you more. You're actually going to go into the hole more on the airport. You're just dollars and cents. You're probably better off saying to the FBO, oh, have the fuel sales, and have someone there. So I guess my feeling right now, if you said, hey, you make the decision, I would say we go with it for the next 3 years. And then about 2 years from now, we kind of go deep. And at that point, we've really kind of figured out what's going on at the airport. North ramp developments going in a direction. We've got a new bank of 10T hangars. We have our good financing. Where's Debbie? We have our good financing that tells us exactly where we are on the airport numbers in the black and the red. We've got all that data. We've got a clear vision of the airport. So I'm at this point in time, I'm very comfortable saying, let's continue this and move forward. I was worried for a long time that it was not financially responsible. But after talking to a lot of people in the airport community about the situation, I feel pretty good about where we are right now. That doesn't mean I'm gonna set things on autopilot. I definitely do want to keep looking into better ways to do things at the airport, but I'm supportive of the amendment to renew their contract right now.
Yeah.
So,
There seems to be a lot of moving parts, like you said, it's a terrible timing.
there are, yeah.
I'll back off. I will
Yeah.
support it as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
I just wanted to take a few minutes and look at the option before we
Yeah.
sign off another
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
If you're happy with it, I'm happy.
Yeah, there's another thing that's hard to quantify, but the FBO and their collection of businesses do bring a certain amount of energy and outside interest to our airport, which can help with the economic development that we'd like to see there. So I see the port very much as, you know, not just at the airport, but all around our county, working in partnership with private industry to create good jobs and all that good stuff. So I think that's an important thing that we also can't, it's very hard to put a number on, so.
Any other comments, discussion?
Well, my 2 cents is, what we've been looking at. In the most recent past with the FBO is improving services and. Improving the FBO experience, and I don't know if it would improve if we took away the current FBO.
Well, it's just like how hard are you gonna, how hard are you gonna negotiate?
Yeah.
You know, how much of our sort of goodwill capital do we want to expend on the nickel and dime details of this renewal contract? And I think thinking longer term, think 20, 30 years, what the future of the airport is gonna be, that's the more important thing, so.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, if there's no other discussion, can I get a motion to approve amendment number 3 to FBO agreement with Hood Tech Corp?
I second your motion.
That's not my motion. Someone has to make them.
I
I'll
approve.
make a motion to
Okay.
approve amendment number 3 to the FBO agreement with Big Tech Corp.
Okay.
Aero Inc.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
I
Chair. Aye. All right, now commission call. Anyone have anything to add? If not, then I will recess our regular meeting and I will call us into executive session for performance evaluations of public officers and employees, ORS 192.602J. And thank you all for your time.
Night.
You're locking up.
Sure. I was very.